whatever was happening in Alexandria at that time period was this cultural like, mashing of ideas,
Yeah.
which gave us all these religions, all these philosophies. I would even willing to say that there's sort of a proto-Christianity evolving from this.
Well, that's a theory that's been put forward, and it's usually formulated like this. A scholar named Michael Lockwood, um, he had argued that, okay, in India, they had Buddhism, and there was king, I think his name was Asoka, something like that.
Ashoka, yep.
And he, it's in one of his stela or inscriptions, he sent out a delegation to the Mediterranean world, and they went to all the major cities, including Alexandria. So you have Buddhists in missionaries, basically, in Alexandria in the 270s BC, around the same time as the Torah, maybe a little bit later.
Wow.
And we know that in the kingdom of Marawe, I don't know how it's pronounced, which is up the Nile, there's Buddhist statuary that comes from that general period.
Right.
And there's traditions, yeah, there were Buddhists in Egypt.
Right.
So then Lockwood and others have suggested that Philo describes a group called the therapeutae who were living in Alexandria. They had a kind of a communal existence. He called them pacifists, but I'm not sure if that's true or not. And anyway, there's a lot of features of the therapeutae that are reminiscent of Buddhism. And there's theories that then in turn influenced Christianity, that some of the early Christians came from Egypt. So, there could have been some pathways for all of this cultural intermixing and influences on a large scale. It's conceivable.
And then when you
and Lockwood freaked out when he read my book, Process and Genesis, and found out my discussion of the Jews in Alexandria at virtually the same time. So,
and that's amazing. And when you factor that into the volumes of writings from Philo, so Philo has all these ideas floating around about God being a trinity, God being of nature of three, the logos being the divine heir of all things. Like, what? That sounds like Christianity right there.
Yeah, for sure.
Then you factor in when the first century comes around, right before the time of Jesus, so the first century BC, you get the school of Hillel, which the founder of that school, his name is Hillel. He's quoted of being asked, "What is the whole Torah?" And he tells the person to treat people the way you want to be treated. That is the whole Torah. So you already have that influence of Judaism happening. Plus, when you factor in the rabbinic Judaism,
where have I heard that before?
Right. And then go fast forward a century later, where past the temple being destroyed, you get this new sort of rabbinic Judaism, where it's like it's based on the Talmud, where it's back and forth dialogue. What does the back and forth dialogue sound like? That sounds like Platonic.
Yeah,
Socrates.
It's been argued that that's dialectic,
right,
and that these are fictional conversations between rabbis of the past, just like Plato wrote these fictional conversations between Socrates and different people back then.
And the profound thing about the Talmud is when you read these dialogues, you're reading something that has an esoteric philosophy baked inside of it. It's not just a mundane conversation. It's a profound conversation that has to do with some sort of teaching within it. And a lot of it's very deeply esoteric, secretive stuff, which is what the Platonic dialogues are trying to do. So you can see the influence between Platonists and the Jews happening
Mhm.
even after the Torah, even after the Old Testament, into the age of the New Testament. And to me, Christianity, it seems like it's like another layer of what already happened. If that makes sense.
Sure, and well, certainly the Christian ideas of heaven and hell, purgatory, all of those come right out of Plato.
Kingdom of Aranos. That's the kingdom of heaven, just like in Plato.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And, he postulated this divine realm that was beyond the material realm where the gods resided and where humans could hope to reside if they were philosophers and perfect and virtuous. That's heaven. And then he talked about the underworld and Tartaros and the people who were uh, wicked but redeemable. They'd just be tormented for 1,000 years and then they get another chance. But some people were so bad they would just reside in Hades or Tartarus forever. This is all straight up Christian doctrine. I mean, they get it all from Plato. It's not in the Hebrew Bible. A little tiny bit of it is in the books of Enoch. But yeah, no, Plato, he cast a long shadow.
The last thing I want to touch on before we close out is what are some of the other, you got I think his name is Thales. How do you say it?
Thales.
Thales. He was if I'm not mistaken, he was a monotheist. Or if he wasn't, he was very close that he talked about God being coming from one. If
Yeah, possibly. There were a few of them who were monotheistic, pretty explicitly so. Um, let's see. I think it was who was it? Well, yeah, a number of the Greek philosophers were basically monotheistic. Several of them were tried as atheists
oh yeah, that's
because they believed in one God. And
that's
that's atheism if you don't believe in the whole polytheistic pantheon.
that's actually a really good point, because Socrates, his charges for his when he was killed, when he was executed, was not only atheism but for importing. How can you be both an atheist and two, importing foreign gods? What does that sound? That doesn't make
Yeah,
sense. So
yeah,
what I think really happened was he wasn't really an atheist. I think he was sort of subscribing to the Platonic, or what we would call the Jewish gods, or the Jewish God was what he was believing in, which is probably what happened. Because if he
yeah.
wasn't believing in Zeus and Poseidon, literally, like I like to point to the Cicero's On the Nature of the Gods, where he has the dialogue between the Epicureans and the literalists, who think that literally Poseidon's in the water right now. Well, Socrates probably was more of a, he probably thought of these gods as not being literal, but as like allegorical and symbolic for the one true God or the one true divinity. So
Well,
that could be why he got put on trial.
certainly the Stoics believed exactly as you said. Um, it's a big problem among the philosophers. How do you investigate this cosmic, eternal God and not get charged for atheism? Like Anaxagoras, uh, he had to flee Athens to into exile, or else he would have been executed. Socrates, one of the things against him was that he was a fan of Anaxagoras, and so, but Socrates chose not to leave Athens and drink hemlock instead. But he claimed that he worshipped Apollo and all the regular gods, and he had no problem with any of them. Uh, he did believe in the supreme intelligence, and he also claimed individual inspiration from his genius, uh, which was a spirit or voice that would talk to him occasionally and warn him of things.
Yeah.
Sometimes he'd just kind of go into a trance, according to some reports.
Wow.
And so he may have been schizophrenic. He may have had auditory hallucinations. That's one theory. So what they said, that his genius, his personal angel guide, as you were, that this was a new god, and therefore you can't introduce new gods to Athens, and therefore you have to drink hemlock.
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
Xenophanes is his quote is a quote from him saying that one God, greatest among gods and humans,
yes,
like mortals, neither in form nor in thought.
yeah,
He called it a first mover, like thought, like Thales from of Miletus,
yeah.
which is so. Yeah, these are ideas that are ancient, and they're not just from the Near East. They're from the Hellenized world.
Yeah, they're not at all from the Near East. The Greeks invented monotheism, um, and this cosmic, perfect God. It was introduced to the Jews via Genesis 1, which was based on Timaeus. So really, they got that whole idea from Plato. But the Bible as a whole, the Hebrew Bible as a whole, is not monotheistic. It it favors monolatry, worship of one God, but
Sure.
but it acknowledges the existence of all the other gods. It's just they were all terrible.
Yeah.
Um,
Is Saturn have anything to do with the Sabbath, the god Saturn?
well, yeah. I mean, the Romans had they named the seventh day of the week
Yeah.
Saturn. That's only documented like 100 BC, though. So,
Well, I
uh,
know that Saturnalia is pretty ancient, and he was
yeah,
like the most. It was the most important holiday. It was a 7-day festival in the late December.
yeah.
So I don't know if maybe it had something to do with the Saturnalia and or the Sabbath, where they sort of rest in this time. But that's sort of a yearly thing. But I wonder
Yeah.
if there's some sort of connection there.
Well, I don't think there's a direct connection with the Sabbath, and I'll explain why. First off, let me just comment that you have this 7-day week, which surfaces here and there. I think mostly because there were 7 planets. There's the sun, moon, and 5 wandering stars that were visible in the sky. So it was common to have, recognize 7 divinities ruling the sky, and I think the week had to do a lot with that. But in in the Middle East, in Assyria and Babylonia, they had a type of document called a hemerology, which was a list of lucky and unlucky days in the month. They'd go 1 through 30 or 1 through 31 and say, better not do this on such and such a day. It's okay to on this other day, though. And in one of them, the 7th day, 14th day, 21st, 28th day of each month had certain things that a king was not supposed to do because it was very unlucky, such as light a fire, travel, a lot of the same things that you see in the laws of Moses related to the Sabbath. So it really comes from these, the 7-day week and the 7th day as a Sabbath is really a simplified version of uh, Mesopotamian hemerology. And probably those scholars I was talking to you about in Samaria, uh, they did a lot of calendar stuff, and they probably invented the Sabbath.